And now to the really good stuff. We've got Elle joining us today. Elle, who I'm sure many of you know and adore as we do, is a consultant content strategist. She specializes in large website redesigns and really helping organizations to make the most of their content. She's worked for around 15 years or more now with clients like Qantas, Atlassian, Australian Museum, Virgin Mobile Australia, lots of federal, state, local government clients. She's done it all. She's also teaches content strategy and coaches people in when they're working in their organisations, and she hosts the other major Australian content meetup, the Sydney Content Strategy Meetup, which is held in person every 2 months in Sydney, and we try and get there as often as we can, even though we're in Melbourne and Perth. All right, I am going to hand over to Elle. And I think we're so lucky to be talking about something that's obviously resonated with a lot of people about how we actually make sure we can measure what we're doing so we know whether it's good. Thank you, Elle.
Thank you so much for that awesome introduction, Lauren, and thank you, Emma and Angus and McGee, for inviting me to talk to everyone today. It's funny because, like, as you know, I run the Sydney Content Strategy Meetup, so I spend a lot of my time curating and pulling together really amazing people to speak at that meetup. So it's really nice to actually be on the other side of things and actually talking as well. So thank you very much for the invitation. So it's funny, yeah, as you said, I've been doing this work for a very long time. And one of the things, that, one of my really uh, fabulous insights from today's presentation will be that measuring content's really, really, really hard. But for me, it is a real distinction between probably what I would say is someone who's starting in their content strategy or content design journey and someone who is a bit further on in that journey. So in my work, what often when I am creating a content strategy and a set of recommendations for a client, inevitably what happens is that we discover a mismatch between what they're trying to do and how many people and the resources that they have to actually achieve that. So I'll end up often helping them with a PD or even potentially a position description or even interviewing for additional people. And one of the things that I'm looking for in a senior is the ability to measure content and the ability to measure content in a sophisticated way. So why do we measure? There in all, and basically, the content work is hard, right? It's complicated, it's complex. There are many moving pieces. My brain finds that challenging. And one of the things that I do when I come across that challenge, be it in measurement, be it in any other area of our practice, is I imagine a big table and I imagine placing on that table a whole bunch of chunks of these moving parts. And I think, how am I going to make sense of this? And this is what I'm going to do over and over in this talk. I'm going to show you how I make sense of the different facets of measurement. And I start off by going, okay, why do we actually measure? It's like, okay, we measure to act. We measure to find out what's working and how and why we need to do something different. And that sounds really simplistic, but I can imagine you think to yourself the number of times you've measured without that function in mind. I'm really going to try and encourage you to think about that as a way to validate not in the English language meaning of putting a rubber stamp on, but validating as in testing whether or not what you're doing is correct. Can I do something as a result of this measurement? So important. And then to understand how behavior has changed over time, and that just means longitudinal measurement. And then to understand a bit more about the people who use our content. So if you're thinking about GA4 in this context, you're thinking, oh yeah, I want to look at where people are from who've looked at this page. I want to see what iOS operating system they're using. That kind of thing. Really starting with the basics. We're not doing it to make a pretty dashboard or to create vanity metrics, which we so often do. Okay, so in this talk, what I want to try and do is this. Oh, I think I was a bit behind on my slides then. I do apologize. So I just need to, that's a summary of the things that I was talking about. Apologies. So in this presentation, this is what I want to do. I want to talk about some common problems, and I'm going to take you low. Imagine we're going on a bushwalk together. we're going to start off in some muddy, kind of dodgy areas, but don't worry. We are going to come out the other end with a beautiful view of the ocean and a bit more clarity. I want to give you, as an antidote to those common problems, a bit of a framework to help you through it. So, why is measurement so hard? It's hard because, well, one of the reasons is because there are so many tools to choose from, right? So, or if it's not choosing, it's like what the tools to choose from, it's like, what are you actually trying to do here? What are you actually trying to measure? It's hard because there are so many different types of content that you're trying to measure. So I devised this content quadrant, which I absolutely love, because it really helps me. Again, imagine that virtual table where I'm chucking everything down, I'm trying to make sense of it, going, there are different types of content. I mostly work in the space of that quadrant in the top left, where we're thinking about action content. Like, I'm allowing someone to do something as a result of consuming content. Sometimes then I might be doing a little bit of kind of product as well. And you might think to yourself, where am I? Am I more action, promotion, product? Am I crafting content as bait to get eyeballs on ads or to sell people? Measuring is also really, really hard because there are so many moving pieces out of our control. So imagine if we take this kind of like schism of a commercial versus an information-based space, right? So theoretically, you might think, well, this is easier than the ATO, for example. Like, measuring whether this content is effective was easier than measuring some information content. And if you haven't thought about this, I highly encourage you to do so. Why? Because the actual product purchase is an event, is a clickable thing on that page. So theoretically, I should be able to say, oh, if my summary of this hot pink bag is really, really good, if my content is good, then I will see a direct correlation to purchase. Whereas opposed on the ATO website, I was like, if I've done a really good job at explaining to small businesses what they need to do, what their taxation implications are for upgrading and downgrading their staff, how do you know whether or not that's been effective? And that's one of the big challenges that I see with my non-commercial clients, be they government, be they NGOs, be they art galleries or whatever. They're like, what kind of measurement framework practice do I put around a page like this? And then they think, oh, the commercials have got it so easy. All you got to do is put a zippy little line around this hot pink bag and people will buy it. But that's not to come. I know I'm going in a bit of a circle here, but that's not actually quite right. Because if that bag's terrible, people aren't going to buy it, no matter how fantastic your content is. So I'm kind of making 2 points there. One, you got to separate what you're measuring from what people are actually buying, and then also acknowledging that when you're creating information-based content, it's really, really hard to figure out how you can use some of these tools that we saw on this last slide to help you measure. Gonna give you some tips on it anyway. It's also really hard because you're like, what I see over and over again is people have an instinct to measure all the things. They're thinking, I've got this digital solution, it's GA4, I want a sweeping brush that tells me whether my efforts are good or not. And I can't tell you how inappropriate that is. I would encourage you to really push down to a granular level. You need to be looking at measuring for something that's much smaller than you think that you might have otherwise thought about. Now, as I've been working with people, teaching, coaching, consulting over the last, God knows how long it's been. Lauren said 15 years. She's probably right.
That's what you said.
I've kind of grouped a whole bunch of measuring fails together. And I've kind of done it in a weird way because it's like I've put together a whole bunch of negative things. And so it might feel a bit strange in your brain, but I think it'll kind of make sense as we progress through it. So I think I see like, it's almost like a maturity model. So I think, okay, what are the basic fails? So it's like, The basic fails is that you don't have a measurement system in place at all, or you're using vanity metrics. And you might be going, really? Those things are the same? And as far as I'm concerned, vanity metrics are the equivalent of nothing. They might even be worse because people think you're doing something and you're not. So this is your absolute basic level of fail. It gets worse. There are intermediate fails, right? So, and you know what? The intermediate fail, there's only really 3 levels. This is the mid-level. I think I see a lot of people in this space. And don't worry again. So when you see this, you might go, oh my God, this is me. It's like, great, that's okay. That's like, now you know that you're in a boat with a lot of other people, and I will share some mechanisms to try and bring you out of this space. I think the big one, and I alluded to this already, you're measuring, but you have no capacity to interpret or act on the insights. And that's kind of, there's a distinction there, right? So for example, so you might have been in, you're looking at time on page and you're looking at these numbers and you're like, I don't know. Actually, time on page is a bad example because time on page is such a shitty metric as it is. I should use another one. What would it be? Even if it's like page views, you're like, I don't know if that's good or not. I remember the first time you sent out a newsletter and you got an open rate and you go, well, I don't know if that's good or not. You're probably at the point in your careers now where you do know that, but there will be other metrics you're looking at and you go, where does that baseline? So I don't know how to understand whether it's good or not, and I certainly don't know how to act on that. Yeah, either with time or skills. Now, you might be thinking, what do you mean? Why have you got external consultancy does it? Well, that's not a problem. That's actually great if you want to bring in an expert. The problem is where you as an internal team are disconnected from what's going on there. You haven't really fully briefed that agency as to what is important to you and what you want measuring. You're measuring things that don't matter. You're not quite sure what tool or technique to be using, or you don't know when you should be using longitudinal measurement versus point in time. Okay. But it does. And it's kind of like, do I say, does it get worse? What's the next level? Is it worse? I don't know. It's like, this shows that you're getting better because you at least have measurement in place. It's not vanity metric. So it's kind of like, it's a sophisticated fail. So maybe this is a good thing that you're failing at this level, right? And you're measuring at the wrong scale. So think about that slide that I showed you before. You're trying to measure all the things as opposed to the right things. You've got this complete overload of data and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. There's no ladder or connection to business goals. Now, for me, this is a really, really resonant one. And that's why a content strategy is so important, where you articulate what it is that you're trying to do using this particular channel, this digital channel. You're measuring things you don't have control over, like the pink bag I mentioned before. And you don't have a really good approach to your measurement. And honestly, if you're making these mistakes, you're a lot better off than making some of the earlier mistakes. So what I want to provide as a bit of a solution to these issues, right, is a model that, again, I've got my table out and I'm trying to chunk things up. And I go, okay, what I want is a 3-phase measurement model to kind of alleviate some of these just measurement confusions. And the first thing I do is this. I go, I want to put in place a quality kind of framework. I keep using the word framework. That's so jargony, isn't it? It's like a quality parameters. And it's like, you know what? When I think about measurement, I'm often thinking about measuring against something else. What I'm doing here is, with my internal team, I have a set of checklists. I have voice and tone. I employ people who are really, really good at their job, and I continue to support them with professional development. So we have this really good understanding of what's going on around the basic quality of your content. The second thing, and this is where effectiveness is where it's probably what correlates most to a lot of the classic measuring techniques, solutions that you've been thinking about. This is where Hotjar, where Optimizely, where GA4 sits. This is where also your usability testing sits. This is where we say, do we know whether the content met the stated goals that we've set out in our content strategy? And of course, you know, those time-bound, clear goals. So this is, and making that distinction between quality and effectiveness, I think is really important, because it is very possible to craft prose words, which is so often the stock of what we're working on. But I should also acknowledge that we are publishing other content elements like images, etc. Are they good is different from are they effective? Are they meeting your, and you might go, hang on, isn't that the same? Are you using synonyms? It's like, no, it's like, imagine you could have a piece of prose that is beautifully articulated and beautifully put, but does it actually connect with your business goals? That's the difference. And then the third piece, and again, this to me is always kind of got this gradient of like, you know, if you can only do one thing, do one. It's always left to right prioritized. I guess that's my information architecture brain. Value is, was the content actually worth the investment? And really, you see people who are crafting content, who are, you know, you can see their KPIs like, let's put out another social media post, let's put out another page, let's get a new microsite up, let's send out another newsletter. And all they're 100%, the focus is on making stuff. And they're not thinking about whether or not it was effective, and they're sure as hell not thinking about whether there was value for money in that activity. Was it valuable? And so again, and you might be thinking, I'm just a content designer, I'm not a mathematician, accountant person. It's like, well, I invite you to not be a mathematician kind of accountant person, but to be a content strategist. And a content strategist is someone who does think about whether or not doing something is worth it. So it's like, yes, I'm going to use my checklist. I'm going to understand voice and tone. I'm going to be constantly either educating, re-educating my team or myself. I know the words that I'm creating are really high quality. I've used tools like GA4 to figure out whether, or ethnographic style user research to figure out whether or not, or, you know, Optimizely to track content to purchase funnels. I know that the content's actually doing something. And if it's not, I will take action to improve it as a result of that understanding. But then also, was all that work actually worth it? So, and this model, it's one that I really hope will help us think about how and why are we making something, to really get away from that whole idea of like publishing is the end objective. It's like, no, it's not. Publishing something that's actually worth our while. It's almost if we rephrase and we think, so we would buy a laptop that is a business asset, right? Do we go, is that business asset a good investment? And I want the same kind of thinking happening for our content. Is that piece of content a good business investment? So, actions that you can take right now. So, what I would love us to do is to think about measuring for action. What does that mean? It means that if you're gonna look at any sort of, like, imagine we're in GA4, because that's often the measurement tool that we're using. Apologies to those of you who are using Adobe or another tool. You're thinking, okay, what am I measuring here? So if I look at the whole site and I see, oh, okay, there are this many people coming to the site, what can I do as a result of that understanding? What changes to the words or images or information architecture do I make? And this action, this provocation for you, this thing I'm asking you to consider will help you really figure out the scale of your measurement as well. You'll be going, okay, so if I'm measuring to action, where do I need to be measuring and what do I need to be measuring? It might be, well, I think you need to measure page by page. So for example, I mentioned time on page before, and I kind of virtually or mentally slapped myself, don't bring up that terrible metric. Why? You're thinking, because of course, I heard Lisa Raycart, who's now working at Atlassian, but back when she was working at the DTA, talk about measuring. And I loved this little story she gave. I can't remember the example. I think she was talking about wills or something. And they were like trying to find an engagement metric. And she was at the engagement metric from a data point of view looked a lot like the confusion metric. So it's like, say someone like stayed on that page for like, I don't know, 90 seconds. You're like, yeah, they're loving it. It was really good. They just like, can't wait to hear more about wills. This is my interpretation, by the way. It was a long time ago. I'm not putting words in her mouth. I just liked the story she told. They're like, but that could also be the same as like scrolling up and down going, what are they talking about? I don't understand this. This is something I've got to do. My mum's getting on and I have to figure out how to do all this. And it's so confusing. So it's like, if you imagine if you had a vanity dashboard saying, we have these many people looking at this page for this amount of time. It's like, what is it actually telling you that means you can make improvements to that page? Where is the actionable insight? And so what you might do is you might go, right, well, so what's the solution to that, Elle? It's like, well, maybe page by page, you need to understand what success looks like. So you might say, okay, if I'm going to use time on page, I'll try and do an average. It's like when I observe people use this page and have a favorable outcome, it might be that they're on here for 90 seconds, whatever. But then it might be, so what's the next step? So it could be, do they click through to what you hope to be the next concept in a chain of concept pages? You go, right, well, for this particular page, success looks like them clicking on this next page. In a commercial setting, success looks like them making a purchase. Again, whether you can take credit for that, I don't know. How many times have you been working for clients or organizations that have products that are a bit, it's like, well, there's nothing I can do. The whole lipstick on a pig kind of idea comes to mind. Measure for action. What can I do as a result of this understanding to make the page better? Connect your content goals to your business outcomes. Now, again, it's like these bullet points are just like these tiny little things on a page, and there's only a few words there, and it makes it look easy. This is really, really complex and hard. Like the bullet point, the slide just makes you'll be right. It's really hard. So, but what does that mean? It means you need a strategy. So let me give you an example. I was working for a client in the last, I don't know, while, and their organization provided relationship counseling, mostly to men who had been, as part of being sentenced for family violence, told that they had to get counseling as part of their, I don't even know what the word is. It's like, you can't say counselling is part of punishment. But anyway, as a result of that action, they've been told by the courts that they need to get counselling, right? And so then I would go to this website and it's talking about a lot of preventative stuff, like light and fluffy stuff. Feeling a bit angry? Count to 10, do some meditation, light a candle. And what I'm seeing there was a real disconnect between what their core business was, which was really tough, really hard, really important work, and how they were kind of describing themselves in their digital space. There was a disconnect between their business outcomes and their content goals, or potentially even their content artifacts. So in order to measure really well, you need to have that real clarity about what it is that your organization is doing. You need to be really connected with that. Look, I have a terrible confession to make. When I was working at Atlassian, I remember somebody asking me how much the products, how much a Jira or Confluence costs. And I was like, I've got no idea. And it is a bit of a tricky question because it depends on how many people and blah, 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 blah. But it was like, it made me really realize how disconnected I was with a lot of fundamental business objectives. And that's what a content strategy does. It gives you that connection. It's like, you work for an organization and then it's like, right, well, I don't need to make up what their goals are. I will just connect my content work, my content artifacts with those goals, and then attach appropriate measurement metric to those goals. then you need to resource right. And that's probably connected with 3 and 4 are really connected, right? It's like you need to have the right people in your team and you need to upskill. So for example, I found it really hard adjusting to GA4. Probably shouldn't be admitting this. It was like, oh, it's so different. It's so confusing. And now I kind of love it. And it's still, I find it really hard when I'm using it on information pages. I should be really clear. It's a lot easier when you've got these clear digital affordances between page to page. But when you're talking about an information page with the action, the thing that you're trying to do. So it's like, I want Australians to vote early if they're not available on Saturday. It's like, how do I measure that they've actually done that based on my content? It's like, yeah, okay. Well, so I need to have the right resourcing, which is around the right tool set, the right access to other people. And I want to ban vanity metrics. And this list, my final item on this list is measuring less but better. And it probably shouldn't be at the bottom, except that I just wanted to show this artful slide to illustrate it at the end. It's like we're just constantly measuring at the wrong scale. I just see it over and over again. So I invite you to think about, how would you measure one page or one cluster of pages? So when I'm teaching content strategy, when I'm doing the measurement component, the exercise that we actually run is one where we identify individual pages on the site and go, imagine if there were 10 pages on this site, which pages are we going to measure? Which ones are the make or break? Which ones are the one that if we don't get this right, we might as well not have this website or this digital, asset? And really start putting I like this idea of like a triangular model around it, where you go, okay, so what are 3 things that we can do to measure whether this page is effective? And then we understand the cost of that measurement in time, in tooling. Are we saying that we want to do, actually user research on that page to see, can people achieve that task? So I had the absolute privilege when I was working at Qantas of having access to an airport with lots of people hanging around waiting and not really minding if we came and did some interviews with them. And I was working on a loyalty program, and we would show them a page and I would say, can you scan that page, read that page? And then I never said, do you like it? I don't care what some random traveler in the airport likes or doesn't like. I say, are you personally eligible for this program? Again, I don't know anything about them, so I don't know whether they're eligible or not. What I'm looking for is their confidence in answering, and they'll say, and I'll say, and then asking why are you eligible? And then they'll go, oh, because it says right here, blah, 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 and that's me. And so looking for that kind, and again, that's so expensive. And I'm aware of the absolute luxury of being so close to the airport with willing potential audiences audiences, I don't mean that at all, testing candidates. But again, I really invite you to think, when you're thinking about these actions, really start very small, and really think about, what's the combination ways that I can measure whether or not this is working, with the objective of making changes if it's not. Okay, so that, honestly, that's it. That's my polemic. So I'm really, really, really interested in your questions. I was meant to be checking this chat, and then I got really deep into it, and I stopped doing that, which is very naughty. I'm so sorry. But I can't wait to scroll through your questions. This is a really great time for us to now have a conversation. I want you to push me. I was talking to the crew from Weave beforehand, and one of the things I said to them is, in every presentation that I've given in the last 12 months, I have learned something really fantastic. So my challenge to you is to really push me on this polemic, this approach that I have, because there's always ways where it's wrong, and there's always ways where you can make it better. And I'm also interested in your questions, your comments, your experiences. That'll help as a group for us to kind of broaden and deepen our knowledge about measurement, and also find ways to make it a bit easier. So it was like, where's the crack? Where's the crack that we can start if we know, or if you know that you're thinking, oh, where am I? I'm just doing these things that aren't quite right, and I really want to start fixing them. Awesome. I love that. So now what I'm going to do is open chat.
I think, thank you, Elle. Just that was amazing. I know McGee kept writing things in the chat going, she's scribbling notes wildly. I think we all were,
I kept
um,
quoting you in the chat, like, oh, that was
all these
so
little
good.
gems.
I'm gonna say that
But
later.
there were some questions early on, so I might go
Love
through
that.
them, Elle, if that's okay, and then people can chime in.
Well, and
Mary had a question. I don't know if you want to ask Mary yourself, but it says, what decisions would you make by measuring quality separately from effectiveness or value? So are these more brand and reputational insights? If quality isn't connected to effectiveness or value, is quality an internal metric?
so I think that's such a good, such a good kind of question, right? For me, they are 100% connected. I don't want to feel like that they're separate, but it's almost, do you know how I kind of think about it? I think if you've got nothing, right? If you don't have a connection with your data and research people, if you don't have money to get Hotjar, if you're like, I don't know how to use GA4, and even if I did, I don't have the time. It's just me and my colleague, and we are just trying to do the best we can. Oh, is that oh, that's a different slide. Sorry, this is the one I was trying to show. I'd be like, right, well, where you start is where is play to your strengths. It's like, yeah, right. I'm going to put together a publishing checklist, and that publishing checklist is going to be something I can 100% control. It's going to be talking about the things that we nail, like character length of titles, of basic plain English, of using the correct level of all the stuff. I don't even need to getting that really right, having that checklist nailed, right? And then you go to, right, was it effective? And that's where you start bringing in some of your measuring tools. And then you go, okay, was all that effort worth it? And often when I'm thinking about value, I'm 100% thinking about money, right? But value doesn't necessarily have to mean money. That's why I use the word value, not cost, because sometimes there's an investment that isn't monetary that I want you to start thinking about. Great question. I
I
love that.
think, sorry, Elle, I think that leads beautifully into the next question I spotted in the chat, which was from Kate Whiteley. I'd love to know whether and how people are clearly demonstrating ROI. Call center data is often used in relation to content, but I feel like there might be a better value return based on your content team costs. So, Elle, maybe you could speak to that, and then we could open it to other people to see if they've got any answers to that too.
So Sarah Richards, or whatever her name is now, sorry, Sarah
Winters.
Winters, beg your pardon, from Content Design London. Content?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Momentarily brain fade. She's published a couple of good blogs about how you can calculate this. And so whenever I have this question, I always refer to them. It's like, and what I really like about them is that they start you thinking seriously about how you can try and do these calculations. We are in a situation where we're trying to measure something that is very difficult to measure the value for. You could almost say, is it similar to brand work? So you hear these stories about, the Combank paying $100 trillion for a new logo instead of branding kind of artifacts. And you think, how on earth was that worth it? How do they justify that? And it's like, well, it's like sometimes there isn't this direct correlation between, okay, we bought a laptop for 100 of our team members and we saw a 10% productivity increase because we were able to get them to work from home and on the road and on the train. Yes, sometimes the value is deflection from call center, but sometimes so I was working for Hunter Water, a water utility in the Hunter region, and they weren't necessarily wanting to deflect from call center. They were like, it's appropriate that people call us. We want that. That's part of our brand. We're not, you can think of probably some companies that spring to mind there where you think, no, they really don't want people to call up. They can't financially support that, or at scale. You think about the Googles of the world. They can't have a call center because everybody in the world is their customer, and that's not feasible to support. But it might be maybe what they're maybe doing, and this is why I wanted talk about value, not necessarily as in terms of money, though money is the obvious place that you go to with value, is, so say what was happening with Hunter Water is that experts within the business were spending a lot of time answering the same questions to people. And it wasn't that that was costly to the business, though it was that it was frustrating and boring and, you know, impacting morale of those experts within the business. So it's like, how do you cost that? How do you say, well, we've made their lives less shit? Their work is more pleasurable. Like, what's the finances around that? And that's why the question's really hard, right? So you go, okay, what am I going to, how do I present this story to senior stakeholders about the value of our work? And it's probably that you need to use some of your storytelling skills and say, and again, it always goes back to your content strategy. So the business is trying to do this thing. We are making content assets that we know are quality and effective. And we think that investment is worth it because we anticipate, or we can show you evidence of how we're getting particular results. But it's really difficult. Think about the ATO example I gave you. This is not an easy piece of content. I know you can't read it, sorry. I think it's content about upscaling and descaling people in a small business and what is the taxation implications to that and what do you need to do, sorry, in case you can't read it. And think about how many pages there are on the ATO website. Like, say there's like 5,000 of them. How do you measure whether that was worth doing from a value point of view? It's like, maybe you just can't. Or it's like, so what do you need to do? You go, okay, we're getting it to the call center example. Love that, thank you. You might go, well, we've got heaps of people ringing about this particular thing, or there might be a temporal wash, and we go, okay, we're going to anticipate that we can handle that, and we're going to tell a story saying, and because it's like, there are so many things out of your control. So say you have written a beautiful piece of content around, I'm obsessed with the ATO. I always use them as an example. I think I really like their content. So it was like for consumers and not for businesses, individuals, end of year financial submitting of your end of year tax thing, right? So you might see a huge influx of questions about that to the call center. It's not because the content's not effective, it's just because it's the end of the financial year. So you really got to try and be pragmatic about pulling these things apart. Yeah.
I think, again, we've segued nicely into some other questions about information-based content. So both Sophie and Monique want to know your favourite ways or some recommendations around measuring information-based content, where the goal is understanding. So Sophie specified low cost, and Monique's asked specifically what sort of metrics do you consider value, or what are some that you see no value in for information content. Dan has linked to a Content Design London article, but I think we'd all like to hear from you as well.
I love that. So yeah, so it's really funny because I feel like, and this slide's kind of important, right? Because it's like, it definitely feels like if you're a physical product or a service or whatever, say like you've got an insurance product that you can buy online, it feels like that's easier. It's like, I can craft some words that really just don't get in the way of this person buying something, because, you know, is their purchase decision happening before this page? Probably, maybe not. So you think, oh, what kind of influence have I got here on this page? But then when you come to information pages, it's like, honestly, like, where is the obvious solution? It's not obvious. You need to look at every single page and go, okay. So for example, there are a couple of hyperlinks on this page. So, you know, with GA4, you can also measure how far people have scrolled down the page. So what I might like to do is, like, I generally take a look, I would like for each page, I want a combination of metrics. So I would go, how deep did they go? Did they click on any of the hyperlinks? And then again, but it's not like, that's not a blanket rule. Clicks on hyperlinks equals success. I need to know for this particular page, click on hyperlink was a success. So for example, I've been doing some stuff with Money Smart, which is ASIC's financial literacy program for the last, probably 6 or 7 years now. And one of the things that I tried to do, and this was an experiment which I don't really know whether it succeeded or not, but this was me trying to answer this exact question, was like, okay, so and again, it works in that context because if you know Money Smart, it's a financial literacy program which is quite contained. There might be 100 pages plus some calculators on the whole service. So we think, okay, so here is a page which has an introductory concept around mortgages, for example. And then, so what I want to know is, did that content about mortgages whet people's interest enough to then push them into the calculator tool? So their calculator tools are really cool. They're probably like, it's almost like if you're trying to do something, you go straight to the calculator, and then the content is kind of like a bit of context around it. But they also might think that it goes the other way. It's like, you have the context and then you try and use the tool. So we go, okay. And so what I called them was I called them sequences, just made up a word. I was like, what I'm looking for is, have human beings, users, completed some of these sequences? Have they gone from the mortgage conceptual page to the calculator and vice versa? So I'm actually looking for the connection between them. It's like, but then again, go back to that kind of engagement versus confusion metric. Does that mean they're like clicking between going, I don't understand this, I'm just going to try and click on the calculator and go back to context? And then you think, okay, well, is there a combination of like how far they scrolled down, whether they clicked on an affordance, a call to action that I wanted them to? And again, right? So absolute success might be coming on, looking at the page for 20 seconds and then leaving without like clicking on an event or a hyperlink at all. So this is where I think what you have to rely on is you have to rely on a really good understand with the content strategy is the way you do this. You have an understanding of what your business goals are, and hence what your content goals and assets are trying to support. And then you do your quality wash, and you know what, from a quality perspective, we've done a really good job at meeting that, beg your pardon, stated business/content goal. And then if I was looking in that middle like option, this is where I would go. I would use a usability test, and I would do it because of course you can't, like, imagine if you've got 5,000 pages on the ATO, we can't do usability testing for each one, especially as they change quickly. But I would take a sample approach. I go, okay, so I'm going to I know every single page is quality. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some usability sampling. Can a user understand what they need to do as a result of, and so it's all about comprehension. That's the usability test. It's comprehension. It's not, do you like it? Okay, so that ATO page is like, this is what you have to do when you downsize or upsize your team. So then you get them to read it, and then you say, can you please tell me what you need to do to downsize or upsize your team? And if they can tell you, then the page is effective. And then you're looking for, how long did it take them to answer? How confident were they? And then you need to understand, how big is that business problem to the Australian government or whatever? And so was it worth describing that? Again, I think another example that I heard from the DTA was them trying to cull and refine all their content. And they were like, we've got so much content. And they went through and they looked for candidates, and they were like, oh, maybe it was the UK Department of Health. And they had all this content about Ebola. And they're like, you know what? We don't need content about Ebola on the government website. It's such an edge case. It's getting in the way of the common flu or nutrition and this really high value content. We're going to get rid of it. And they're like, you know what? If Ebola comes to the UK, what's going to happen is we will roll out information really quickly and appropriately. And everybody who has to manage that Ebola breakout will not be going to the website to find out what to do. They will have other important and more relevant sources. I know that's a long answer to kind of say you can't. So it's like, well, what does that mean? That means you need to be pragmatic. You need to, be clear about what you can and you can't measure. And again, it comes back to this idea of scale, of really thinking, okay, what can I measure? At what scale? Can I use a sampling mechanism the same way scientists do when they're trying to measure stuff?
I think what I'm getting from you, Elle, is there's no single answer to this. It depends on your business goals. It depends on the page. It depends on what your organization is able to do. But it's figuring that out, I think, where our challenge is.
I think I couldn't agree more. There is no magic wand. People, we're always looking for this solution, right? You know, they're always saying, we want a kind of aggregate solution to tell us that we're doing a good job. And I was like, and first of all, I'd say that's not what measurement's doing. Measurement's about showing you the gap so that you can make an improvement. Sorry, it's not a pat on the back. That's not the point of it. The point of it is to show you where you can make improvements, to act and do something differently. And then just be, and when you're talking about your content work, be really pragmatic and realistic and say, you know what, we can absolutely measure quality. We're experts at that. We can nail that. We also, through our content strategy, have a really good understanding of what our content's trying to do. And we will be able to put a set of loose, I don't mean loose, I mean, you just have to be pragmatic about how useful it is. Metrics around whether or not it's effective, and maybe take a usability sampling approach.
So McGee had a question about moderated qualitative research versus unmoderated quant research. And it seems to me that you're saying often it's going to be both. Like,
McGee, were you thinking about, like, so I'm doing a lot of optimal workshop stuff at the moment, like with IA, so where I, build a card sort or a tree jack and then I send it out and people complete that independently and I'm not observing them do it. What did you mean by that? Just to help.
What I meant, which I kind of think you have answered maybe just in your last answer, was it sounds to me like when you're talking about how do we measure the value of informational content, you can't just grab one bit of data and be like, we were valuable. Like with commerce, you can be like, we increased sales by this, but like with information, it sounds like what you're saying is, which makes total sense, is there's a qualitative component where you're like, we have validated that when we do this, it has the result you're looking for, which can only be measured qualitatively because you need a human to kind of tell you that there's no data measure. But then you kind of maybe combine that with quantitative data that you do have, like, we need to make that change to 1,000 pages because we know it worked on this one. Like, I guess that's kind of,
Beautifully. Yes, thank you for articulating what I was trying to say so beautifully. And that's what I meant by the sample. It's like, thank you so much. That was very articulate.
Well, thank you. but yeah, I think, it just really resonated with me because I feel like that, yes.
I've been going through these kind of like waves of self-doubt in this measurement space, right? So what I did was I started going to all these kind of measurement meetups. And so they're all like all these marketing dudes basically. And they're all on the numbers using these crazy tools. And I was like, I need to push myself. And what I found was something that I was really surprised about and kind of disappointed, but also really happy about. They're all saying what I'm saying now. They're saying it's really hard to measure things. And I thought the marketing guys would be like, have these, you have these complicated measures and say, this is absolute clarity about what's going on here. And they're like, you know what? It's really hard to measure things, especially with the cookie, the emphasis away from cookies. And, in Europe, they're all being blocked. And so there was this amazing guy, I can't remember his name, from Canva. And he was like, they were in growth, right? So the growth guys are the ones that I'm really looking at because they're all really attuned to micro changes in the UI, the UX, and the content. And they're using quite sophisticated digital tools to try and understand the difference, what's happening. It's all in the funnel, right? So I was like, what can I extrapolate from them to help me in my space, which is often that content page, the information page, as opposed to the purchase page. That's where I mostly live my life. was doing this really, what they talk about, synthetic data. And I was like, what the hell's that? And it's basically they're using Gen AI to kind of create models of how people might engage with the content because they don't have the actual data. And so he was, yeah, I know, so exciting.
An actual use case, awesome.
I know, but then he said it took me 3 months and it came the garbage, absolute garbage. There was nothing I could use as a result. And and again, I was like, I went on this roller coaster of like, oh my gosh, this sounds really exciting. And then, and then I was like, well, yeah, right. So, and it was really, that's definitely where that was a big trend in these meetups that I've been going to. They really, because their actual real data about how users are pushing through websites are getting blocked by the do I mean GIPA? Sometimes I get my acronyms confused. What's happening in Europe where they're trying to, it is GIPA, or is GIPA the
GDPR.
Yes, thank you so much,
GDPR.
Marie. Thank you. I don't know why I always get my acronyms mixed up. I love your work. Thanks. Yeah, and so they're having to figure out, like, can we synthesize? Can we somehow use Gen AI to predict how people are going to move through these digital spaces because we're not allowed to track them anymore?
Yeah.
And so, and I was really quite shocked at them how, and again, these were tech companies, the example I'm talking about, how pragmatic and how open they were about saying, we don't really know what people are doing.
And that you can't just reach for the easy number and think that that's telling the story. We've done 1,000 we've published 1,000 pages this year. We're so successful at our jobs. Yeah.
Yes, which is why I think this kind of model is actually useful, because you can say, and again, I'm always very pragmatic about how you want to talk up to your seniors. Like I say this dodgy thing all the time. It's like, if you've got seniors who, like senior stakeholders who aren't really interested in the detail, maybe you do make them a vanity metric that says, give them a dashboard that gives them confidence that, you've got some good engagement or whatever. But like, and that's fine, but you're not measuring there as far as I'm concerned. You're doing something else. You're doing stakeholder management. If you're actually measuring and you think, what does Elle think measuring is? Elle thinks measuring is looking at what the business is trying to do and figuring out if your content's actually doing that. And if it isn't making a change, then you really need this three-pronged approach, because the effectiveness, the one in the middle, is a lot more difficult than you think.
It's almost like what you're saying is, what do I make decisions based on? Like, I'm gonna make a change based on what do I use to make a decision to make? Yeah, I'm not gonna just base it on the vanity metric. But yes, thank you.
Yes. I'm really sorry. I normally like to stick in the chat, and I apologize for not doing that so well. And I think I forgot to show this slide. Maybe because it looks like the other one and I panicked and thought it was the same. But this again is like just a really basic model for me. It's like, why are we measuring? Get a baseline. People often don't know, like they just haven't thought about baseline. It's like, we're measuring to measure difference. Think about your year 9 science. This was where we learned all this stuff. Start with somewhere, do something, either have a hypothesis about what you think is going to happen, or if you don't, that's fine too. Maybe the experts say you should, but sometimes I do something and think, I'm not sure what's going to happen. For me, that's okay. I'm hoping it's going to be a good thing, not a bad thing. I'm hoping it's going to be this thing, but sometimes it doesn't work that way. Measure, baseline, do something, have the goal in mind, and then measure again and see whether you're effective. Hey, I realize it's 1 and everyone's going to have to go. How do I save this chat? Because I want to read it all. I don't want it to evaporate. It looks so good. Oh, I found a button that said save chat. I just clicked it.
You found it.
I'll also send it through to you. Yeah.
Can we take a selfie before everyone goes? Let me stop sharing and let's just
let's do it. Yeah,
I love that. Oh, look, everyone, because I couldn't see you all properly because of the way I love this. Okay. 1, 2, 3.
Hey.
I love that. And you guys should take one as well, because you know how you'll be seeing different people.
True.
To me. So it's like, we should. Are you like, no, I'm not doing that?
No,
do you know?
No, I'm trying.
Okay. 1, 2, 3.
Yay.
I love that. So I do consulting, I do teaching, I do coaching. I run the Sydney Content Strategy Meetup. I would love to see you all come and like, let's really elevate this content space. You know, I always say that QA and content are the two most low status groups in any organization. I want to change that. That's my goal. Let's get active. Let's talk. Let's advocate for ourselves. Let's show them all how amazing we are.
Thank you, Elle. I've just seen some announcements pop up in the chat, so I might just share screen again and go through the announcements, but we do understand we've gone over time. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of your questions. Hopefully we covered lots of your questions in the actual answers we got to the other questions. So let me share. Before I get on to announcements, I do want to say a massive thank you to Elle for giving us such a valuable talk. I think valuable in both a kind of thematic way and a way to make us think, but also in a practical way. And I think that's really special to have both those things going on. So as we said, we do like to share announcements as part of the content community. And I did see that Mary, suddenly I can't see my chat. Mary had an announcement that they're looking for a taxonomist at Canva. Was that it? Yep.
Might have dropped off, but she did post that. Yeah.
I think Matt might have dropped, but yes, we are looking for a taxonomist.
What a cool opportunity that would be.
I think Swapnil has an announcement about the write the docs. Swapnil, did you want to type something, or feel free to take yourself off mute if you want to.
Can't see it in the chat.
He might have gone. Yeah, he has. Yeah.
Gone. Oh, okay.
Yeah, and one more, which was Kate's one on Hilary Marsh's webinar for measuring content effectiveness.
And there's also Health New Zealand is currently recruiting for a senior content designer. So lots of interesting jobs and events out there. Elle's put her content strategy meetup link in the chat. We highly recommend you go, and not just if you're in Sydney, but you should go from other places to Sydney. We will be having our next meetup on the 29th of May. We're just sorting out the details, so stay tuned. Past talks, including Elle's, will be available on our YouTube channel. Just search for We Are Content SD. And a reminder that we do Content Design London training. The next fundamentals course is next month, and Content Design in Action is, we're just waiting for some advice from Content Design London themselves about what they're doing with that course, but that should be up soon. Anything else that people wanted to share?
Lovely to see you.